Built for builders, from beginners to pros, this is where great backyards begin. Welcome to the Ultimate Deck Podcast, your source for backyard building tips, product breakdowns, and pro advice from the front lines of the industry. Here are your hosts, Shane Chapman and Wade Laurent.
Welcome back, everybody. Wade and Shane, the Ultimate Deck Podcast. Going to tell you some more stories. So Wade just showed me a video here of, I don't know, what were they doing? They were building cabinets. It looked like they're assembling cabinets. Yeah. And this guy's kid takes a pneumatic brad nailer and shoots like a 2-inch nail into his shoulder right in the bone. That would suck so bad. And it immediately made me think, like, has my kids ever done something like that? But anyways, no. But the other morning it was funny. So I've got a 3-year-old, Kendall, you know him as. And we had walked the older 2 boys to school. This is our routine in the morning. All of us will walk the 2 older boys to school in the morning. We don't live very far from it. And we'll walk back, and then one of us will drive Kendall to his preschool. So anyways, in that moment, we got back to the house, and we were kind of packing things up, and my wife was like, said to Kendall, she's like, do you want a snack before we go? And he's like, yeah. She's like, what do you want? He's like, candy. And Jason's like, well, you're not going to have candy for a snack. Do you want something else? He's like, nope, I want candy. She's like, well, you can't have candy. He's like, or she said, why do you want candy? And he's like, well, just because. And she's like, well, because isn't an answer. And he's like, yes, it is, you dick. To my wife, you didn't even call me the dick. Calls her a dick. Yes,
sounds
it
like
is.
She had it coming.
You dick. For a 3-year-old. I was in the pantry looking for something, probably packing my own snacks and lunch. And I just I had to go in the pantry. I was dying laughing so hard. I was like, holy shit. Oh, that's a good one. So, man, kids can make you laugh sometimes. So,
did he get the candy or what happened?
Yeah, I don't even know how it ended. That's the thing. I don't know. She was laughing too. She turned and started. I can't remember how it ended. I have to ask her today. Did you end up giving him that candy? Like that's.
You'd have to hope no,
pretty funny.
Because then, like my takeaway from that would be like,
that.
yeah, if I called you a dick, I got candy. And it'd be like, you'd be good luck getting called mom from now on.
Yeah. Okay. Today we're talking about other barriers and when you're restricted from doing certain things, like calling your mom a dick. Do you need a permit to build or expand a deck? Common question.
So many people get this wrong.
All of them. What's
you know what we wouldn't
fallacy?
You know what we wouldn't have to sell material if people just paid us to advise on when they needed a permit.
Yeah probably.
The most common is I already have a deck,
Right.
so I must have had a permit, so I don't need a new permit.
I don't need a permit just to replace the deck I have.
So here you go.
Wrong.
That's wrong. And here's why it's wrong. If you replace that deck with exactly the same deck, you would not have needed a permit. It would have been approved. But because you're going to tear it all apart, you're going to take the framing. As soon as you touch the framing, then you need a permit. Because if your deck was framed 12-inch on center with 2x12s, and it was a 16x12, and then you tore it all off, and then you built it 24-inch on center with 2x4s, it would not be strong. And you'd be like, well, it's the same size. Yeah, but it's not even close to the same deck anymore.
Yeah.
12-inch on center with 2x12s. Now 2 foot on center with 2x4s. No, 0 chance that works. So you need a permit so that the municipality can tell if the deck you built is safe. That's all. They don't care about the deck you used to have. That one's gone.
Yeah.
Whether you're adding onto it or you're expanding it or you're replacing it exactly the way it was, you need to know that what's going up works.
Yeah. I do think this varies from place to place. I certainly know that here, which we're obviously most familiar with our local codes, but here that's the answer. It's like if the deck already has a permit at some point, regardless how long ago it was, likely doesn't, but if it did, and all you're doing is taking the deck boards off and putting new deck boards on, no permit required.
Not structural.
As soon as you start touching the structure, then you have to reapply for a permit. Even if you're doing it exactly the same, even if it was 2x8s, 16-inch on center, 10x10, and the new one's going to be 2x8, 16-inch on center, 10x10, you still have to apply for a permit, even if you're doing exactly the same.
So they know that you did it exactly the same.
Yeah. But I do believe, I've heard, I don't know this for sure, but I've heard that some people say in other areas that as long as you're building it exactly the same way in size, that even if you're tearing the entire thing out, as long as you're replacing it the same way, that you don't need to get a new permit. So that might be the case in your area. You'll have to check.
Was it the guy that also told you don't have to stain your deck boards till next year?
Yeah, probably.
The same guy told you that.
Very well could be. So that scenario is like, often you do need one. Now, this whole topic is a little bit tricky because the rules are so different everywhere.
Yeah.
It'd be so nice if they'd systemize this into like, and they kind of do. That's the whole point of like having code books, but every area has their own adjustments and modifications and revisions and abstractions.
They're all pretty close.
All sorts of things. They follow the same guiding principles, but even
it's okay that the municipalities have different rules because, like, we don't get earthquakes, and LA does.
True, but the scenario that I'm saying is more ridiculous is the fact that in Regina you can do one thing and in Pilot Butte you can't, or you have to do it completely differently. And
Same
it's 15 minutes out at the edge of Regina.
Yeah, same province.
Yeah.
That all falls apart for me.
Yeah.
I think provincially you should have like a provincial building code, and that should just be it.
Yeah. Because we've got different rules like in Regina and Saskatoon, which is two different cities that are 150 miles apart, 250 kilometers apart. And they have different rules, and it's like, okay, I get that. But it's like, but when the cities and then the immediate bedroom communities around them are running off a different set of rules, that starts to get a little silly. But generally, you're going just about everywhere will have some scenarios where you don't require a permit on a new build, and it's usually sometimes related to the height of the deck. So if it's below a certain height, you don't need it. If it's considered just like a ground level deck. So in some areas, that's like in Saskatoon, that used to be 8 inches. In Regina, it was 12. Now it's in 24 inches in Regina. I don't even know what it is in some of the small communities. But sometimes you don't need one if the deck is below a certain height. Sometimes you don't need one if the deck is below a certain size. So sometimes if your deck is less than 32 square feet, so it's a stair landing, don't need a permit for that. Some areas, they don't require permits if you are not attaching to a house. So if it's free floating, they're like, yeah, you don't need a permit if it's just free floating. So there's different rules as to when you might not need one. And that is something you absolutely have to check with your local building department because it changes so much from one place to the next. Now, the other part of it is, can you sometimes changing an existing deck can require you to revisit the permit process as well. So we talked a little bit before about replacing the same deck may or may not require a new permit, but if you're adding on to a deck, that is probably going to require another permit as well. You've got a 10 by 10, you want to extend it out to 12 or whatever you might be doing, probably requires a permit because you're affecting the structure of the deck. The other somewhat common scenario that can require you to revisit that is if you're adding something on top of the deck. So let's say you have an existing deck, 12 by 16, you decide you want to add a screen room on top or a roof structure or something over top. Now you need to revisit this process because all of a sudden the loads acquired and the characteristics of the usage of the deck is changing. Now you've got additional wind lift and you've got additional snow load that plays into it, and the pile requirements may change. You've got additional weight bearing down on it now as well. So adding something like a roof structure or a screen room onto it may change when you need to get to permit as well.
Yeah, and that's like, those are all just safety like concerns by the city. You know what I mean? It's like the city's not trying to be awful. They're not trying to gouge you and get a bunch of extra money out of you. It's just like they want to make sure that if you build this.
You sure about that?
Yeah, I am sure about that. I can tell because they're running deficits, so they don't worry about recovering. They're all just hemorrhaging right now, so they're not actually trying to break even.
Yeah, well.
Otherwise it would be even worse. But typically it's just so there's some safety involved in it.
Yeah, and like you and I have had some drunken episodes about this topic where it's like, is it really about the safety? Because if it is, why aren't they more strict, or why don't they accept liability, or why don't they have better accountability, or what? Like,
well, why? Like,
why don't they check certain things during the inspection process? If it's really about safety, why do they not check the most important part that fails the most often?
That's the greatest. I think this is the greatest. Like, what is it? Rue? Is that what it's called? In the whole world, is that these inspectors do these things and there's zero accountability. They get to like tell you what you should and shouldn't do, and then it's just like, but if they're wrong, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's only one other industry in the world that gets to do that. So,
now you mentioned safety, but there's other reasons. There's a couple scenarios that suck here. if something happens to your house, let's say you have a house fire or something, you likely need your deck to be a permitted structure to get insurance upon it.
Yeah. You for sure need to include it in your insurance, and it is not uncommon for them to ask you if it's permitted.
Right. So you may have to provide some proof of that, depending on where you are. And the second part is, sometimes when you're doing a home transfer, you're selling your house, and the new buyer may want to ensure that the permits are pulled on it because they don't want to inherit the responsibility or issue if there wasn't one put on it.
Right.
Because in some places, the repercussions can be quite strict, from like fines to you're tearing that deck off it now. Doesn't matter how much it cost or when it was done or how much that emotional damage that's going to cause you. You have to remove it. And so they may want to know that was permitted, done properly, so that they don't have to deal with that potentially.
Yeah. And so an example of like a real world example of that happening is if somebody built a deck, it is unlikely that if your deck is built properly that you would have to tear it off. I believe you could pay a fine and then you could apply for the
chance to remedy it.
Yeah, and you could fix it, right?
Yeah.
Where it goes sideways is if they have built over an easement, and you won't know that until you start to dig into getting a permit. Or if you've covered too much of your land, there has to be a certain amount of permeable surface per area to allow water runoff, right? And so if you cover too much of your yard with a deck, they might be like, you have too much coverage. It's got to come off. Or that's too close to the property line, or it ran over a gas line, or it's over it's like.
Yeah, that zoning check is almost like arguably
that's the most important.
You can go in and find your own code books and span charts, whatever, make sure that your deck is built safe.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's allowed to be built where you built it.
Doesn't mean it's compliant.
Right.
Yeah.
So that can be tricky for sure. So it's good to go through the process.
You like that word?
For that at least.
That's a good word.
Compliant?
Yeah, compliant.
I don't like it typically, but.
I learned it in university.
Yeah. This is the first time you've used it since then?
I don't think so, but
But
I've been holding on to it for a while.
Put it in the back for 20 years and
saving it.
Pull it out.
It's been 20 years since university.
Yeah.
Gross. It really has been.
For you. It's been a little bit less for me since I was there. Who pulls it? That's the question. If you're hiring a contractor to build the deck, who's pulling the permit? I think
it's worth talking about.
Yeah.
It's the homeowner's responsibility.
Right.
So if your contractor is building it and you would like a permit, you can pay them to do it for you. But at the end of the day, when that deck gets built, if there's no permit and the city shows up and slaps a stop work order on your front door and you're halted, that's not the contractor's fault.
Yep.
That's on you.
Or you finish it and go to sell your house and they want a permit. Nobody's calling the contractor that built it 9 years ago to get him to go down do it.
Not
It's the
happening.
homeowner's responsibility, technically. So, of course, if you're having a contractor build it, any good contractor is going to do the process for you. They're going to pull the permit and do all that for you, probably. But technically, if they don't have to.
They don't have to.
If they don't, it's you that gets slapped in the hand.
Yeah.
So make sure you're asking those questions at least when you're going to do it. Do I require a permit? And unfortunately, you have to cover your own ass here a little bit too, because you may ask, do I require a permit? And a contractor may say, nope. Who'd you hire though? Like,
it's the same.
Do they know for sure?
It's the same size of deck. We'll just replace it.
Yeah.
No big deal. It's like, this podcast, these guys.
So be careful who you're hiring and who you're asking that question to.
Yeah.
Now the other consideration is when you're building a new deck, sometimes the permit process can have quite an effect on the cost of the project and the timelines of the project. So I believe that we're blessed with a fairly lenient area with fairly reasonable timelines and a fairly reasonable cost. The most decks that we're involved with pulling permits for are like the permit's like $100, $200.
Yep.
And the timeline is like a week or two to get it back. Now, if it's a super large project or something, sometimes it can drag on a little bit and cost a little bit more money, but it's not very often it's any more than a few $100s.
Yeah.
But I've definitely heard from other areas and people that I'm just like, how has it gotten that bad? How has the bureaucracy driven this to the point where your permit costs you $10,000 and it takes
months,
a year or 10 months to get, or 2 years to get? Like, how? I'm positive, and I can't remember who it was. I'm positive I read one time that somebody was paying like $30,000 for a permit. Like, I don't know what size the project was, but
right. So like that wouldn't be a home.
Nope.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
like when you build a whole house, the permit doesn't cost that much.
Yeah.
It's like ours, like I want to say it was maybe it was $1,500 or something. It's $1,000.
Yeah.
But that's okay. There's a lot of things to look at. You have to look at the HVAC and you got to look at the grading of the yard, and like there's a few things to look at.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me. But I cannot imagine maybe a commercial project. Maybe if you're doing a boardwalk, I could see how that could get a little out of hand. I don't think it's right.
That wasn't this.
I don't think it's
somebody's
right.
backyard.
That's
It was
wild.
Insane. Yep.
That's insane.
So thankfully we're okay on that. But anyways,
Yeah.
it's good for you, even if you're not building a project, you're hiring somebody, it's good for you to be familiar with the requirements of the process to make sure that who you've hired is following the steps.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's sometimes you can hire people that you know are going to take care of it, but if you're just finding a guy off a recommendation on Facebook, you should probably familiarize yourself with the process too to make sure you're not getting...
The other thing that
Taking
you should
advantage of.
consider during the process of building a deck and getting a permit is that you will need a framing inspection. And so when that happens, there's the potential for a bit of a delay because your deck is going to get framed and your guys are like, the contractor is going to want to keep moving and they want to put decking on. And so there's like, you might end up in a little spot there where you get kind of paused for a day, and that's unfortunate.
Lots of places require pile inspections as well.
Yeah.
So you have that step 2 that also gets delayed.
Right. And so like you imagine that you start to build a deck and it's like piles go in, wait a day, frame the deck for 2 days, wait a day. Man, if you're a contractor, that's got to be a nightmare to on site. Then you have to leave, back on site, leave, back on site, leave. Like,
Yeah. A lot of waiting.
frame it, deck it, railing, leave the bottom exposed. Build the deck 3 feet in the air, even if your door's ground level. You imagine walk out and then upstairs onto a deck.
Yeah.
It'd be fun. Anyways, that was all I had. That was my last.
Good.
Bored you.
Well, thankfully we're in an area that's fairly lenient. So it's getting a little bit more strict and more strict every year though.
And I think that's because those guys are listening to our podcast, and every time we come on here, we rip them about not doing a good job, and then they increase their like inspections, and then we're like, why are you doing that?
Did it to
that's what you're
ourselves.
actually asking for.
All right. Number one rule is to, you know what? Most of the stuff is available online as well. Probably almost for sure in wherever you live, just go to your city or town or RM or whatever it is and look on their website. They've usually got a permits section or a building bylaws section that you can go in there and you can get a package and it tells you exactly what's required. So there is places to go to learn this stuff yourself. So do that until you do, and see you next week.